rhythm discrimination task. So we already calculated the hit, the Z hit, and the Z false alarms. For all these subjects, now you have some subjects who have no false alarms. So subject 10 and subject 20. So what we need to do so that we can easily subtract hits, subtract false alarms from hits, we would like to have them in the same row, so that's just generally easier. So this is basically, this calculation is your DPrime. The DPrime value is, so if you go to any DPrime website, it will tell you this one is a particularly good one. So if you Google, it's a UCLA website, but it will explain how to calculate DPrime. But basically, you know that DPrime is this formula, which we've just calculated here. So hits minus false alarms, so proportion of hits minus false alarms. So you make sure that your rows are always corresponding, 26, and in this case they will not correspond because there were no participant number 10 and 20 made no false alarms. So to account for that, you want to place participant number 10 later. So move 10 to the end and move 20 to the end. And then now you can see that they now correspond in rows. This one, participant number 14, also had no false alarms. Okay, so now do they correspond? Yes, they correspond. So now your job is to apply the same formula. So basically G19 minus that. So here you have your DPrime values for your metric complex rhythms, which are here, and your metric simple rhythms, which are here. Now, how do we calculate when we are faced with a situation where the subject, like subject number 14, had a perfect hit score? So out of the 15 trials which he or she could have made, he or she could have responded, he or she could have responded and made a hit. There were 15. So in our trial block, there were 30 metric simple rhythms. So there was in total 60 trials, 30 metric simple rhythms, 30 metric complex rhythms. Within that batch of 30 metric complex rhythms, the correct response for half of them was same, which is 1. Your response is, your response is 1, and for half of them, so 15 trials, the correct response was different, which was 0. So in this case, the participant had a full score of hits. So what you need to do is apply that formula. So you can just Google, what if my hit rate is wrong one. So this is the advice given by other people. How to deal with hit rate of 1 and false alarm of 0 from Kang Lee's website. It's a nice little description. You would basically apply this formula. So you can read this. So because we cannot calculate proportions with zeros, we have to correct for that. So do this standard correction. So the standard correction is simply applied by using this formula, 1 divided by 2n, because we know that the true false alarm rate falls somewhere in between 0 and 1 divided by n being the maximum number of trials in which you could have had a false alarm. So in this case 15, because there were 15 trials where the correct response, well, where the stimulus did not change within this metric complex rhythm. So where there were, for example, 30 metric complex rhythms, 15 of them, the stimulus did not change. So that's why your value would be, your n would be 15. So the formula is 1 divided by 2n. So the larger number of trials you have, the smaller your true false alarm, your estimated true false alarm rate. So you can't put in 0 because there's no such thing as a proportion of 0. You apply this correction to make it like a small value that is close to 0. The larger the n value is, the closer the value is to 0. So you simply apply that formula. So in that case, that was if there was zero false alarms. So in those cases, so let's apply the formula and then do a Z transform on that. So the formula would be 1 divided by 2 multiplied by 15. And then we do the same Z transform. So norm, and make sure you have the correct number of brackets. So you see those green brackets and then the black brackets, so that's the correct number. So there you go. So we have for participant number 10, 20 and 14 who had no false alarms. Those are the values. Now we need to calculate the corresponding value for the person who had perfect hit rate. So if you have a perfect hit rate, the formula you would apply would be 1 minus 1 divided by 2n. Okay, so it's very similar thing. So you apply the formula again. So 1 minus what's the formula? 1 minus 1 divided by 2n by 2 multiplied by 15. So again, make sure that you are putting the brackets in the right places. I always overdo them just in case. And then norm, so again, apply the transformation. So I think I have enough brackets. One last one. And there you go. So you can see that false alarm rate of very close to, if you have 0 false alarms, the value given to you is this value. If you have 15 hits or all hits, a perfect hit rate, then the value is this. This tends to be reasonably consistent. Okay, so what you need to do then is to do this calculation for run 2, because in our case we're interested in the differences between run 1 and run 2. So you would do that by so you acquire, so here we have acquired the DPrime scores for run 1, and we need to do the whole process for run 2. And then after that, you do a paired t-test between run 1 and run 2. Okay, so here is a place where I have already done this analysis. So it's like a cooking show where we do analyses beforehand. We cook beforehand and then we display that afterwards. Let me organize this in a nicer way, like before. And same thing, organize this that way so it's less messy for you guys. Okay. So I've basically done the same thing with run 2, except I've just put it in the same sheet. So here's run 1 and here's run 2. So let me delete all these weird cells first and do basically what I did just now. So then you would have the values that you need. yeah, so I guess I won't waste time telling you how to do this. I think you probably have a good idea of how to do it. It's the exact same thing for run 2 and calculate the D-prime scores. And once you've obtained the D-prime scores for run 1 and run 2, then you can run a paired t-test between run 1 and run 2. So you can do this in GraphPad. So I've already done this in GraphPad. So I've put in run 1 values here, run 2 values here, and then you can basically run t-test by hitting analyze, column analyses, t-test, run 1, run 2, and you ask for paired t-test, and then you also ask it to create a descriptive statistics for each column, and then you get the results. So here are your nice results, your t-test values and the mean values and so on. Okay.